That house was the kind that made every neighbor's jaw drop. White picket fence, red roof, a lawn manicured so perfectly it could have been on the cover of a gardening magazine. Even the mailman slowed down when he passed it, whistling low and muttering, "That's gotta be a couple million, easy." Helen Marshall stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of that house. The setting sun painted her in warm gold, every strand of her graying hair glinting like thread, but her face held none of the radiance the scene demanded. Her fingertips pressed against the glass. The cold seeped through her fingertips, her wrists, her elbows, all the way to her chest, and she shivered. 59 years old. Retired for 2 years now, but her heart had never really stopped working. 40 years. 40 years as a nurse, and she knew better than anyone what grind meant. Thousands of overnight shifts. Tens of thousands of goodbyes, of last breaths, of families crumbling in hospital waiting rooms. She'd done every dirty job, never flinched. 8 patients to a room, call bells going off from every corner, and she'd walk the length of that ward with her medicine tray until the soles of her shoes wore thin. But she never complained. Complaining was a luxury. She couldn't afford luxuries. She had a daughter to raise. Her husband had died young, a car accident, sudden, brutal. One day he was there, the next he wasn't, not even a goodbye. Lily was 6 then, with 2 crooked pigtails, standing at the funeral home door in a too small dress, her small fist clutching the hem of Helen's white nurse's uniform. She looked up with those big, bewildered eyes. "Mom," she'd whispered, "is Daddy not coming back?" Helen had crouched down and pulled her daughter into her arms so tight her own ribs ached. "Daddy went somewhere far away," she said. "It's just you and me now." That day, she made a silent vow she'd grind herself into dust if that was what it took to give Lily a good life. So she didn't buy clothes. Didn't take vacations. Didn't go out for drinks with co-workers. Didn't get a gym membership. She even avoided the doctor when she got sick, just toughed it out at home. Her colleagues called her cheap. Her relatives called her a martyr. She just smiled and said nothing. Only she knew what that growing number in her savings account meant: her daughter's future wedding, her daughter's safety net, her daughter's escape route if marriage ever turned sour. 6 months ago, she'd transferred every last cent of that number in one lump sum. Millions, her entire life savings, all poured into this house. No mortgage, no debt, just a clean, clear title. The day she got the deed, her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the little red booklet. The clerk asked who should be on it. Without a second's hesitation, she said, "My daughter. Lily Marshall." Just her. She'd thought, "I'm old. I don't need anything for myself. All I want is for my girl to have a stable home, a place where she doesn't have to worry about mortgage payments or kowtow to in-laws. That's all I ever wanted." Asterisk worth it. Asterisk she'd rolled those 2 words on her tongue, and they tasted sweet. But she never dreamed, not in her worst nightmares, that the house she'd built with her own 2 hands would become a gaping maw, ready to swallow her bones and all. And she never dreamed that the jaws of that beast belonged to a face she saw every day, a sweet, kind, gentle face. The front door clicked open. Helen turned. Lily came in first, wearing a soft yellow sweater, her hair loose over her shoulders, a grocery bag swinging from one hand and a smile on her face. Behind her came Evan Collins, her son-in-law, 6 feet tall, white shirt, black trousers, handsome enough, but his eyes darted around the room like he had something weighing on him. And then, Patricia Collins. Patricia was dressed to the nines. A lilac silk blouse with a pearl brooch at the collar, her hair swept up in a flawless twist, her leather heels gleaming. In her hands she carried a wicker basket with gold trim, lined with lace, holding a perfect row of homemade cookies that looked like they'd come out of a gourmet bakery window. "Helen." Patricia's voice was honey-warm and bright as she swept through the door. "Standing at the window again, daydreaming? Come, try my new batch of butter cookies. I cut the sugar just for you." Helen managed a tight smile. "Thank you, Patricia. That's thoughtful." Patricia set the basket on the coffee table and sank into the sofa like she owned it, crossing her legs at the ankle, one hand resting on the armrest. Her eyes began their slow, deliberate tour of the room, first up at the crystal chandelier that had cost over $4,000, its facets catching the sunset in a spray of tiny rainbows, then over to the Italian leather sofa, buttery and rich, and finally out the sliding glass doors to the yard, the emerald lawn, the rose bushes in full bloom, and in the corner, a hand-woven wicker swing chair with a floral cushion that Lily had picked out herself. Patricia's eyes lingered on that swing chair for 3 full seconds. Her pupils contracted just slightly, like she'd spotted something that made her chest tighten with envy. Helen saw it. Every bit of it. And her stomach dropped. This house was the crown jewel of the whole town, prime location, premium finishes, zero debt. Everyone who saw it envied it. Everyone praised Helen's luck, her savvy, her generosity. But the deed, that little red booklet, had only one name on it, Lily Marshall. Patricia's blood had been simmering over that fact for months. Her son Evan, graduate of a good school, a bank manager pulling down a solid salary, handsome, well-regarded, he deserved better than to live in his mother-in-law's house. Sure, from the outside, it looked like a sweet deal. But in Patricia's mind, her son was a live-in son-in-law, a kept man, a joke behind his back. Every whispered comment about Evan the house husband made her grind her teeth at night. She'd come here today for one reason, to make that house her son's property. But her smile never wavered. If anything, it grew warmer. She turned to Lily, who was quietly peeling an orange in the corner of the sofa, and her voice dripped with maternal concern. Lily, sweetheart, I wanted to sit down with you and Evan, and your mother, of course, and just talk about your future together. Lily looked up, orange juice glistening on her fingertips, and smiled without a trace of suspicion. Sure, Mom. Go ahead. Patricia let out a long, theatrical sigh, the kind that carried the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. You've been married almost 6 months now, and things seem wonderful. But I'll be honest, my heart's been unsettled lately. I toss and turn at night. She reached out and took Lily's wrist, her thumb stroking the young woman's soft skin in slow, soothing circles, like she was calming a child. This house, it's in your name only. And people talk. You know how they are. They say Evan's mooching off his wife, that he couldn't even afford a starter home for his own family. Hearing that cuts me like a knife. Evan, perched on the arm of the sofa, dropped his head at just the right moment. His Adam's apple bobbed. His lips pressed into a thin white line. His hands clenched on his knees, knuckles gone pale. He said nothing, but the whole package, the slumped shoulders and the bruised pride, was a masterpiece of silent suffering. Any woman with a soft heart would have melted. Helen's gut twisted. She knew this dance. The good cop, the bad cop mother and son moved like they'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. Patricia pressed on, her voice softening to a murmur, like spring breeze over still water. Men need their dignity, Lily. Evan goes to work, goes to client dinners, and all the while people whisper behind his back. How long do you think a marriage can survive that kind of erosion? You're such a kind girl, surely you don't want your husband to be humiliated every day? Lily's composure cracked. She set down her orange. Of course I don't. Then it's simple. Patricia's smile bloomed, sweet as honey. You and Evan just take a trip to the county clerk's office and add his name to the deed. It's just paperwork, quick, easy. Once his name's on there, he'll walk tall again, and your marriage will be steady as a rock. Everybody wins. She turned to Helen, her gaze soft as cotton candy. Helen, you're a mother too. You must want nothing more than for those two to be happy and stable, right? The words floated through the air, light as feathers. But Helen heard the iron hook hidden underneath one tug, and it would rip 40 years of her life out by the roots. She stood there, blood rushing to her head. Her temples pounded. Her ears rang. Patricia's smiling face blurred and sharpened, blurred and sharpened. Every dollar she'd saved, every night shift she'd endured, every insult she'd swallowed, all of it had been laid on the table in one careless moment, and Patricia was smiling, holding up a handful of worthless chips, saying, just add a name. Don't be so petty. Helen's nails dug into her palms. The pain was sharp, searing, but she didn't let go. She opened her mouth. Her throat was stuffed with cotton. It took everything she had to force the words out, dry and raw. Patricia. I bought this house with my own money. It's a gift to Lily, and Lily alone. Prenuptial property. I'm not adding anyone's name. The room went silent. Patricia's smile froze, like someone had hit pause on a video. Her eyelashes fluttered. Her mouth hung open for a single, suspended second, and in that second, Helen saw it, clear as glass, a flash of something cold and venomous in Patricia's eyes. A snake's flicker. But only a second. Then Patricia was smiling again, even softer than before, and she let out a little sigh laced with hurt. Helen, why would you think that of me? Her voice trembled. Her eyes even went red around the edges, dewy with unshed tears. I only want what's best for the kids. What would I possibly want with my children's house? I just hate seeing my son get kicked around by gossip. Marriage is about trust. If you keep everything so separate, doesn't that just push them apart? She looked down and dabbed at her eye with the back of her hand, a quick, ladle-like gesture, just enough to make her point. Evan didn't miss his cue. He stood up abruptly, head hanging, his voice cracking with manufactured stoicism. Mom, forget it. I'm not good enough. 5 words. Heavy as lead. A 6-foot man with red-rimmed eyes saying I'm not good enough, that kind of emotional sucker punch could knock anyone off balance. Lily exploded off the couch. She lunged at Helen, grabbing her mother's arm, her fingers trembling. Mom. What's wrong with you? It's just a name. Why do you have to make this so hard? Evan has never done anything to you, why are you pushing him away? Helen looked down at her daughter. Lily's eyes were wet too, tears hanging on her lashes, angry, desperate, like when she was 5 and lost her favorite toy. Her eyes were full of simple, absolute trust, but it wasn't trust in her mother. It was trust in Patricia, in Evan, everyone but her. Something in Helen's chest caved in. She raised a hand, wanting to touch her daughter's cheek, but it stopped in midair and fell back down. Her fingers were shaking. She couldn't stop them. Lily, she said, her voice wrecked, this isn't small. This is everything I have. This is our last. Oh, Helen. Patricia swooped in, sliding an arm around Helen's shoulders. The touch was warm, gentle, almost affectionate, but Helen felt like a snake was coiling around her. You're just too guarded. We're family. Don't you trust your own daughter? The kids love each other, that's what matters. If you cling to this house so tightly, people are going to say. Patricia leaned in close, her lips almost brushing Helen's ear, her voice dropping to a whisper. That you're selfish. That you can't let go. That you don't really want your daughter to be happy. And Lily will have to live with that. She'll be humiliated in front of her in-laws. You want that for her? Each word was a needle dipped in poison, sliding in 1 millimeter at a time. Helen's shoulders went rigid as stone. She opened her mouth to fight back, to rip Patricia's mask off, to show Lily the cold glint in her mother-in-law's eyes. But then she looked at Lily, still looking up at her, pleading, desperate, trembling like a small animal waiting for judgment. Helen's chest heaved. She sucked in a breath and swallowed it down like broken glass. She caved. I'll agree to add the name. The words were barely out of her mouth when Patricia's eyes lit up, that greedy green flame, bright and hungry. Her smile widened, sweeter than poison. But Helen lifted her head and fixed Patricia with a gaze cold enough to freeze water. We're doing a marital property agreement. His name goes on the deed, but he gets no claim to ownership. No matter what happens, this house stays Lily's alone. Patricia's smile froze. Cracks formed at the corners. It held, just barely, but Helen could see the strain. Patricia Collins had just been outmaneuvered for the first time in her life. She sat there, the remnants of her smile clinging to her lips, but the warmth had drained from her eyes completely. Her hand rested on the arm of the sofa, and her nails were picking at the leather, scritch, scritch, leaving faint little crescents. Helen saw every one of them. That elegant, polished woman was literally clawing the furniture to keep her temper in check. Fine, Patricia said, and the smile came back, smooth as pressed linen. Fine. A property agreement. I support that completely. Whatever's best for the children. She said it with such perfect sincerity, lips curved just right, crow's feet crinkling at the corners, that anyone else would have believed her. But Helen had seen too many families at hospital bedsides say he's going to be fine while already checking probate lawyers on their phones. She knew that smile, mouth up, eyes empty. Nothing behind the irises but air. 3 days later, the county clerk's office was a zoo. Numbered tickets buzzed from machines, the air smelled of toner and stale coffee, and people muttered in low, urgent voices. Helen had come early, her manila folder packed with purchase contracts, wire transfer records, payment receipts, everything. She'd zipped and unzipped that folder 3 times before leaving the house. She caught herself in the mirror by the door before she left. Her face looked sallow. The bags under her eyes were deeper than they'd been 6 months ago, and the silver in her hair had multiplied like weeds. She tried to smile at herself, just a little encouragement, but the corners of her mouth wouldn't cooperate. She didn't have the strength to pretend. Patricia showed up in a cream trench coat with a jade silk scarf, looking like she'd stepped out of a fashion editorial. She spotted Helen and rushed over, reaching for her bag. "Oh, that looks heavy, let me take it." Helen pulled the bag closer, shaking her head. "I've got it." Patricia's hand hung in the air for a beat, then dropped. Her smile didn't so much as flicker. Of course, whatever you're comfortable with." Inside, the crowd pressed in like sardines. Patricia was everywhere at once, flitting from counter to counter, asking about photocopying, quizzing clerks about forms, circling back to Helen with bright reassurances. "We'll get this done before noon," then straight to the notary, no waiting. Helen's nerves were a live wire. She kept her eyes glued to Patricia's hands, every paper she touched, every form she handed off. But the crowd was relentless. She was a 60-year-old woman with bad knees, and she couldn't push through the swarm the way Patricia could. Patricia moved like an eel, slipping through gaps Helen couldn't even see, dragging Lily by the arm from window to window. "Lily, sign here. Lily, this one too. One more, sweetheart, there, all done." Lily followed like a lamb, barely glancing at the pages in front of her before scribbling her name. She kept glancing back at Helen with a reassuring smile. "Mom, go sit down, we're almost done." Helen stood 20 feet away, her grip on the folder so tight the edges were crumpling. She watched Patricia's white trench coat weave through the crowd, that perfectly composed back, the precisely timed gestures, the murmur of warm words that never quite reached her face. You couldn't find a single crack. Not one. But Helen noticed something. Every time Patricia handed Lily a form, her index finger tapped twice, tap, tap, near the signature line. And every time she tapped, Lily would sign. Helen's heart hammered. She tried to push through the crowd, but a woman with a screaming baby in a stroller blocked her path. She sidestepped, it took 3 seconds, and when she looked up, Patricia was already turning away from the final window. She held a receipt high in the air. It was stamped with a bright red seal, and her grin was a mile wide. "Done. All processed, in the system, can't take it back now. Congratulations. Kids, you officially own a home together." Helen's blood turned to ice. She lunged forward and grabbed Patricia's wrist. "The notary. We agreed. Notary first." Patricia glanced down at the hand clamped around her wrist. The smile thinned, but she didn't pull away. She let out a weary sigh, the kind you gave a difficult child. "Oh, I checked while Evan was waiting. The line at the notary is backed up till 4 this afternoon. We'd be here all day. Let's just go home and come back another time. It's not urgent." Evan materialized from the direction of the notary's office, hands spread, shrugging. "The queue's out the door. No way we're getting in today." Helen's grip tightened. Her knuckles popped. "Patricia. You promised. Add the name first, notarize second. You gave your word." Patricia tilted her head, still smiling, but her eyes had gone completely flat. She withdrew her wrist from Helen's grasp, not forcefully, but firmly, like pulling a used tissue out of a box. "Helen, You're taking this too far. We're family. You're acting like this is a corporate merger. The house isn't going anywhere. Evan isn't going anywhere. And your daughter," she glanced back at Lily with a fond smile, "is still your daughter." She turned and draped an arm around Lily's shoulders, her voice dropping back into that syrupy, maternal register. "Come on, sweetheart, you've been a trooper. Lunch is on me. Let's get out of here." Lily hesitated. Her gaze shifted between her mother-in-law and her mother, her expression confused, uncertain. "But, Mom," she said softly, "you really did promise about the notary." Patricia bent down, touching her forehead to Lily's. "Oh, sweetie. You think I'd lie to you? I want nothing but happiness for you and Evan." "Your mother," she sighed, as if with great patience, "your mother just worries too much. She's getting older, she overthinks everything. Don't hold it against her. She loves you. She just shows it in a difficult way." 3 sentences. Just 3, and Helen's every concern, every legitimate fear had been brushed aside as the ravings of an old woman. And Lily bought it. Her shoulders loosened. She even managed a little half-smile, the kind that said, "Oh, I see now." She looked at her mother with a flicker of apology, but mostly, it was exasperation. "Mom," she said quietly, "let it go. I trust her." Cold water poured over Helen's head, soaking her through. She stood there in the chaos of the county office, people swirling around her like fish in a stream, and no one noticed the pale, trembling woman in the corner with a manila folder full of useless receipts. She thought of something then, a summer night, years ago. Lily was 7, burning up with fever, her small face flushed crimson. Helen had come home from a double shift to find her daughter delirious on the living room floor. She'd gathered her up and run to the hospital, and Lily had mumbled against her neck, "Don't worry, Mommy, I don't hurt." Helen had stayed awake all night by her bed. In the morning, when the fever broke, Lily opened her eyes and said, "Mommy, your eyes are all red." Helen had held her daughter and wept. "I will protect this child," she'd sworn. "Nothing will ever hurt her." And now that child stood in another woman's arms, speaking for her, defending her, lost to someone else's lies. Helen zipped her folder shut. "Let's go home." She walked out first. The wind caught her coat and sent it snapping behind her. Halfway down the steps, her knee buckled, she nearly pitched forward. No one reached for her. She held onto the railing for 2 full seconds, forcing the tears back, forcing herself to stand straight. She didn't look back. The next 2 weeks were a fog. Patricia stopped bringing cookies. She didn't need to anymore. She came and went from the house as she pleased, the curtains were too dark, the kitchen layout didn't work, the camellia tree in the yard was bad feng shui. Every statement was no longer a suggestion, but a pronouncement, and then a command. Helen's possessions began to disappear. Her old Bible, the one she'd carried for 20 years, vanished from the coffee table. Patricia said it was worn out, Lily reported without looking up from her phone. "She got us a new one." On the table sat a pristine, gilded edition, still in its shrink wrap. Her tea set, the one she'd used for 30 years, vanished from the kitchen cabinet. In its place, a pristine bone china service with gold trim that looked too pretty to use. Helen opened the cabinet, stared at it for a full minute, and closed the door without a word. A lock appeared on her bedroom door. Patricia had suggested it one day, with a gentle laugh, "Better safe than sorry, old people need their privacy." The next morning, it was installed. Helen didn't have a key. She tried the door once. It wouldn't open. One evening, Helen came back from the grocery store with a bag of potatoes and carrots. She was halfway up the front walk when she heard voices through the window, Patricia's voice, soft as honey, and Lily's in reply. "Your mother has such a tight grip on you, doesn't she?" Patricia was saying. "Think about it, your whole life, she's made every decision for you. What you wore, who you were friends with, even who you married. You're a grown woman now. You have your own family. You can't let her run everything." Helen stood frozen on the walkway. The plastic grocery bag's handles cut into her fingers. Lily's reply was hesitant, uncertain. I know, but she's my mom. She just wants what's best for me. Wanting what's best and actually helping are two different things, Patricia said smoothly. The person you'll spend your life with is Evan. Not your mother. She won't be there forever. Evan will be. You have to know where your loyalty lies. Helen set the grocery bag down on the front step. She turned and walked down the street, past the row of identical houses, to the creek at the edge of town. It was dark now, the water was black and slick, reflecting the scattered lights of the houses across the way, each one like a fallen star. She leaned on the railing, the wind cutting through her coat, making her teeth chatter. She remembered her husband, 40 years ago. He hadn't been handsome, or tall, or charming. But he'd been there every night, waiting outside the hospital door after her shift, a warm sweet potato wrapped in newspaper in his hands. You don't have to come every night, she'd told him. He'd shrugged. I don't want you walking home alone. He was gone now. And she'd survived. Barely. She'd buried every hardship and saved every sweetness for Lily. But she'd forgotten something. She'd fed Lily so much sugar that her daughter had forgotten how to taste poison. She walked back home slowly. The groceries were still on the step. One potato had rolled into the grass. She picked it up, brushed off the dirt, and went inside. The house was empty. The new Bible sat on the coffee table, its gold leaf cover gleaming under the soft light. That same night, while Helen walked home from the creek, Evan Collins sat on the edge of the master bed, his face lit in sickly blue-white by his phone screen. Lily slept soundly beside him, one hand draped over her pillow, her nails painted a pale pink she'd gotten done just last week. The faintest smile curved her lips. She was dreaming. Maybe she was dreaming of a world where her mother wasn't fighting her, where Patricia wasn't whispering in her ear, where everything was clean and easy. Evan turned his phone's brightness down and opened his gallery. The new deed, two names side by side, his and Lily's, crisp black letters under a bold red stamp. He stared at it. His throat was dry. He opened a saved conversation. A loan broker, the profile picture was a Porsche. The tagline read, no collateral. Fast cash. Same-day funding. He'd messaged this guy a month ago, gotten the quote, $170,000 against the equity in the house. He'd hesitated then. Closed the chat. Now he reopened it. Still around. He typed, his fingers twitching. That property, how much can I get on it? The reply came in seconds. Price went up. $190,000 now. Both spouses on board. Evan's thumb hovered over the screen. He glanced back at Lily. Her face was buried in the pillow, her breathing soft and even. A faint memory flickered their wedding day, her veil caught in his lapel button, her laughter bubbling up as she said, "Look, even my veil wants to marry you." He closed his eyes. Then he typed, "She doesn't need to sign. My name's on the deed. Can do. Need photos of ID, marriage certificate, deed. Fast approval, funding by 10 a.m. tomorrow. 24% April. That work?" Evan's thumb hung for 3 seconds. 3 seconds of running the numbers, his brother's business debt, his mother's tearful midnight calls, the 3 maxed-out credit cards, the car loan he was about to default on. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a tiny voice whispered, "That's her retirement. That's everything." But the voice was faint as a mosquito, and he squashed it. Deal. Sending docs now. He went to the study, snapped photos of his ID and marriage license, and sent them off. When he got back in bed, his back was slick with cold sweat. He lay there staring at the ceiling. He couldn't see anything in the dark, but his heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might crack a rib. Lily stirred in her sleep, rolled over, and pressed her face against his back, her arm draping loosely over his waist. He didn't push her away. But he didn't take her hand either. At 9:58 the next morning, his phone buzzed. Evan was on the toilet. He picked it up. $190,000. From an account he didn't recognize. The memo line read, "Property loan approved." He stared at the number for 3 full minutes. His mind was blank, just white noise. Then he deleted the text, stood up, flushed, and pocketed his phone. Lily was frying eggs in the kitchen, the oil hissing as egg whites fanned out across the pan. "Hey," she called over her shoulder, "it's Saturday, let's go have lunch with my mom. She looked kind of tired yesterday, dark circles." "Yeah, sure," Evan said. He poured himself a glass of water. His hand trembled. A few drops splashed on the counter. That same day, he transferred $160,000 to his brother Eli. He sent $11,000 to his mother Patricia's account. She'd been eyeing a gold bracelet for weeks. The rest he kept, paying off one credit card and buying himself a new laptop. When he set it up on his desk, the aluminum casing gleaming, a stray thought flickered through his mind. This thing cost more than she made in 2 years of night shifts. He crushed the thought. Patricia, flush with cash, shed her mask like a snake shedding skin. She no longer needed to be sweet, or patient, or gracious. Her stride lengthened, her voice carried farther. At the church socials, she sat among the other women with her teacup poised, and her fingers instinctively went to the new gold bracelet on her wrist, turning it, like a prayer wheel. "You don't know Helen Marshall," she told the women over scones at the community center. "She's," dramatic pause, cup set down, hands clasped. "Unbearably controlling. That woman has never had a man in her life, so she clings to her daughter like a life raft. Even after the girl got married, Helen can't let go. She has opinions on their curtains, their furniture, everything. It's exhausting." Her audience leaned in, hungry for more. "She seems so nice," one woman offered. Patricia waved a dismissive hand. "Surface. All surface. She's nice enough to me, but to Lily, she's a bully. And my son, my poor son, has to come home to that tension every night. It breaks my heart. The house, though? I heard she bought it." Patricia's eyelid twitched, but she recovered quickly. "She did, yes. But honestly, why keep score in a family? Evan isn't after her money. He just wants Lily to have a home where she's not micromanaged." But Helen, she looked down at her teacup, tracing the rim with a fingertip. "Helen insisted on contracts, notaries, everything. Like we were criminals." She sighed, heavy and wounded. "I don't want anything. Just peace for my children. But I'm treated like a thief, and..." She stopped herself. Her voice broke. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Within a week, those little seeds had scattered across town. Helen noticed it first at the grocery store. The checkout girl gave her change with an odd, knowing look. Then at the community garden, her neighbor Marie smiled at her, but it was a careful smile, held back. And when Helen walked away, she heard Marie's voice drop to a murmur as she turned to the woman beside her. Helen didn't stop. She kept walking all the way to the creek, where she sat on a sun-warmed bench and pulled an apple from her bag. It was sour. She ate it anyway, every bite, even the core. The woman who had been a pillar of the community for 40 years, the one who knew every family's medical history, who stayed late to hold dying patients' hands, that woman was now the town's controlling mother, marriage wrecker, clinging old bat. And Patricia, long-suffering, generous, selfless Patricia, had everyone's sympathy. But Patricia wanted more than money. She wanted Helen out. She wanted the house to be fully hers, and for that to happen, Helen had to be gone, not just dead to the world, but physically, visibly gone. And so Patricia sat with Lily in the living room every night, whispering in that soft, patient voice, while Evan scrolled on his phone beside them. "Lily, think about it. Your mother sacrificed so much for you. But you've repaid her. You've been a good daughter. Now you have your own life. You can't carry her forever. It's not fair to you, and it's not fair to her either." Lily was curled in the corner of the sofa, a throw pillow pressed to her chest. Her voice came out muffled. "But she's all alone. If I don't..." "She doesn't have to be alone," Patricia said gently. "There are senior centers, clubs, hobbies. She could have a whole new life if she'd let herself. You can't be her whole world forever. You're married now. You have to live for yourself." Evan didn't look up from his phone. "Lily, your mom's too dependent on you. The more you give in, the more she'll need. Exactly, Patricia said. Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. A clean break, she'll learn to stand on her own. Lily said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on the TV, some game show with a laughing audience, but her mouth was a flat line. Upstairs, Helen sat on her bed, staring at the locked door. The walls were thin, she could hear fragments. Clean break, stand on her own, not fair. Each word a nail driven into her ear. She didn't go downstairs. She just lay down and pulled the covers over her head, wrapping herself in darkness. The air under the blankets was thick, hot, hard to breathe. She didn't lift them. That night, she dreamed of her husband. He was young again, a faded blue shirt, leaning against the hospital back door, holding a newspaper-wrapped sweet potato in his hand. She ran to him, and the potato was still hot. She bit into it, and it was so sweet it hurt. She looked up to speak to him, but he was gone. She stood alone in an empty alley, half a cold sweet potato in her hand, the wind blowing through her. She woke up with a wet pillow. The next afternoon, Patricia arrived without warning. She was wearing a new hunter green sheath dress, heels clicking on the foyer tile, the heavy gold bracelet catching every ray of light. She didn't take off her shoes. She walked straight across the wool rug to the center of the room, surveyed the space with a slow nod, and sat down across from Helen. Her legs crossed. Her hands folded on her knee. Her back was ruler straight. And the look on her face was no longer masked by pretense, no warmth, no kindness, no feigned concern. Just business, cold and clean. Helen, she said, her tone as measured as a corporate memo, you're getting older. The stairs are becoming a problem. I've noticed you favor your right knee. I've found a place for you, Sunny Acres, up north. It's a good facility, affordable, about $300 a month. Your pension will cover it. You can move in and let the kids have the house to themselves. She picked up her water glass, took a sip, and set it back down with a crisp click. Helen sat across from her, hands on her knees. Her face didn't change. No trembling, no paleness. She barely even blinked. She listened all the way to the end, and then she slowly turned her head toward Lily, who was standing in the kitchen doorway. Lily leaned against the doorframe. Her hands were twisting her apron hem into knots. Her head was down, her hair hiding her face. She looked small, smaller than she'd looked since she was 12. Her lips moved once. Twice. Like a fish gasping for water, but no sound came out. Helen waited. She waited for her daughter to lift her head. To say one word, no, Mom, don't go. But Lily's head only sank lower. Her fingers went on twisting the apron, tighter and tighter, until the fabric was a stiff rope. Helen sat there, and something in her chest began to shrink. Smaller and smaller, until it was a hard little stone. All her life, she'd believed that if you poured yourself out for people, they'd remember. She'd wiped patients' bodies, emptied bedpans, sat up all night with the dying. She'd believed that kindness bore fruit. Now she knew, kindness only mattered to people who knew how to receive it. To wolves, a bleeding heart was just a meal. She stood up slowly. Her knee twinged, she caught the armrest for balance, but her back straightened. She looked at Patricia. She looked at Lily. I understand, she said. 3 words. No tears. No outrage. No pleas. She turned and walked up the stairs, one step at a time, holding the rail, making sure each foot was planted before she lifted the next. Halfway up, she heard Patricia's soft chuckle below, a quick, quiet little pop of satisfaction. Helen pushed open her bedroom door, stepped inside, and closed it behind her. The latch clicked, separating 2 worlds. She slid down the door until she was sitting on the floor. The wooden boards were cold through her sweatpants. She sat there, staring up at the ceiling. There was a crack in the plaster, thin and winding, from the light fixture to the corner of the room. She watched it for a long time. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. She was just tired. So tired she wanted to close her eyes and never open them. But she didn't sleep. She sat there for an hour, thinking about nothing. And when the light outside the window changed from orange to grey, and from grey to deep blue, she pulled herself up. She opened the bottom drawer of her bedside table. Her hand went all the way to the back and found an old metal box. The paint was chipped, the edges bent and scraped. She popped the lid. Inside, a bank book, some yellowed receipts, an old key, and a photograph. The photo was from Lily's 5th grade graduation. A little girl in a white blouse and blue skirt, a big red flower pinned to her chest, smiling so hard her eyes were little crescent moons. Helen stood beside her, decades younger, hair dark, cheeks full, a smile that reached every corner of her face. Helen rubbed her thumb across the photo, just a small smudge, and slipped it into her inside coat pocket, next to her heart. The rest of the box's contents, the bank book, the receipts, the old key, went into a small drawstring bag, which she tucked into her other pocket. She smoothed the bed, fluffed the pillow, flipped her blanket into a tight square. Then she went to the window and pulled the curtain halfway. Across the streetlights had come on, soft orange halos hanging in the evening air. She watched that light and thought, tomorrow, I'm calling Jennifer Kane. Jennifer Kane was the only female lawyer in town, 40-something, short hair, black-rimmed glasses, crisp and decisive. Helen had chatted with her at church a few times. She handled family property disputes. It had been casual conversation then. She never thought she'd actually need her. Helen walked to her desk, opened a drawer, and took out a pen and an old notebook. She flipped to a blank page and began to write. Her handwriting wasn't pretty, but the strokes were heavy, the pen bit deep into the paper. Deed add-on record. She paused, the tip of the pen bleeding a small ink spot onto the page. Then she added, Patricia promised notarization, reneged. Lily present as witness, but Lily may not testify. She scratched out the last clause and wrote, need evidence. Evan's recent spending unexplained. She thought of Evan's new laptop. Patricia's gold bracelet. 2 small things, but with no visible source of income. A bank manager's salary wasn't that generous. Her heart tapped at the thought. She added a question mark. Property mortgage, check status. Her hand trembled as she wrote it. She wanted that line to be unnecessary. But she knew Patricia, that woman's appetite could swallow a horse, and the name on the deed was just the appetizer. The main course was still coming. And if Evan had already mortgaged the house? She put the pen down and slipped the notebook under her pillow. Outside, night had fully fallen. She could hear dishes clattering downstairs, Lily's laugh, Evan's low voice, Patricia's soft murmur, happy, warm, a family dinner in full swing. And Helen sat upstairs, an old box forgotten in a dusty attic. She leaned her head back against the chair and closed her eyes. The next morning arrived with brutal, blinding sun. Helen woke before dawn. Downstairs, someone was already in the kitchen, the hiss of eggs in a pan, the whir of the coffee grinder. Patricia, probably. Helen didn't go down. She sat on the edge of her bed, pulled on her coat, tucked her drawstring bag into her pocket, and slipped out the side door in her soft-soled house shoes. The side gate led to a narrow alley behind the house. No one used it. The hinges whined as she pushed through, and she paused, looking up at her bedroom window. The curtains were closed. No one had seen her. Jennifer Kane's office was on the 2nd floor of an old building downtown. The sign outside was modest but polished. Helen arrived at 8:30. The receptionist, a young woman just unlocking the front door, blinked at her. "Oh, Mrs. Marshall. You're early. Miss Kane isn't in yet. I'll wait." Helen sat down in the plastic chair by the door, her bag on her lap, hands folded over it. 20 minutes later, Jennifer Kane arrived in a navy suit, short hair, a coffee cup in one hand. She spotted Helen and immediately quickened her pace. "Helen. What's going on?" Helen stood up. Her voice caught in her throat, it took a moment to get the words out. "Miss Kane, I need your advice. About my daughter's house." Jennifer didn't ask any more questions. She just opened her office door. Come in. The office was spare: a desk, 2 chairs, a law certificate on the wall, a fern on the windowsill trailing long green strands. Helen sat down and started pulling things out of her bag: the bank book, the purchase receipts, the transfer records, and last night's notebook. Jennifer studied the records. Her brow creased. You paid for this house outright? Yes. My personal savings. For my daughter. And it was solely in her name? Yes. Until 3 days ago, when we added her husband's name. Without a marital property agreement. Jennifer took off her glasses, wiped them on her sleeve, and put them back on. Why didn't you get the agreement? Helen's throat tightened. She took a sip of water, cold, startling. His mother promised. She said we'd do the add-on first, then go to the notary. When we got there, she found a way to get out of it. She told the story: how Patricia had shuttled Lily from window to window, how she'd avoided the notary, how she'd played her cards beautifully. Jennifer listened, making notes, her pen scratching across the page. When Helen finished, Jennifer set the pen down and folded her hands. Helen, you should know, the add-on is done. Without a property agreement, this house is legally marital property. Reversing that is going to be very hard. Helen nodded. I know. It's not impossible, Jennifer said. If you can prove the add-on was obtained by fraud, that Patricia promised notarization but deliberately avoided it, you can go to court. But you'll need proof. What kind? Audio, texts, witness testimony. Jennifer paused. Will your daughter testify? Helen was silent for a long moment. The fern leaf stirred in a draft. She watched it sway. I don't know, she said at last. Jennifer set a business card on the desk. Then here's the first thing you do. Go to the property registry. Check if this house has been mortgaged. If it's clean, good. If not. She didn't finish the sentence. But Helen understood. At 10:30 that morning, Helen stood at the property registry counter. The clerk was a young woman with tired eyes. She took Helen's ID and the deed copy, typed something into her computer, and then looked up with a wary expression. This property has a mortgage filed against it. Dated 3 days ago. Amount, she squinted at the screen, $190,000. Did you know about this? The words didn't land at first. It was like someone had struck her with a baseball bat, but the sound reached her ears late, distant, muffled. She gripped the counter. Her nails scraped across the man-made stone. I know, she said. A stranger's voice came out of her mouth. She walked out of the registry on unsteady legs. The sun was still blazing. It bleached the world white. She leaned against the wall for a long moment, waiting for her vision to clear, then began the slow walk home. When she reached the gate, she saw Patricia in the garden, watering the roses with Helen's old watering can, the cheap one Helen had bought at a yard sale for $1.50. Patricia had thrown it out, Helen had retrieved it from the trash, and now Patricia was using it again, her gold bracelet catching every drop of light. You're back, Patricia called. Where'd you go this morning? Lily was asking about you. Come inside, it's hot. Helen stood at the gate, looking at her. She saw the water sprinkling from the can's spout, beading on rose leaves. She saw Patricia's beautiful silk blouse, her perfect hair, her warm, careless smile. Helen didn't move. She put her hands in her coat pockets, her left hand brushed the old key in its cloth bag, her right hand rested on the photo over her heart. 40 years. She'd been bending for 40 years. She stepped through the gate. Her feet found the flagstones, one after another, steady. This time, she wasn't bending anymore. The price of a mother's love. Part 2, The Reckoning. Helen stepped through the gate and walked toward the house, her feet finding the flagstones one after another. Patricia was still standing by the rose bushes, watering can dangling from her fingers, watching Helen approach with a curious tilt to her head. The gold bracelet caught the afternoon light and threw a tiny prism across Helen's path. You look pale, Patricia observed, her voice carrying that same veneer of concern she'd perfected over the months. You really should sit down. I'll make you some tea. Helen walked past her without slowing. She pushed open the front door, crossed the foyer, and headed straight for the kitchen. Her hands found the drawer where she kept her grocery receipts, the small spiral notebook where she jotted down every suspicious date, every odd comment, every single thing that had felt wrong but that she'd told herself she was imagining. She pulled it out and began flipping through the pages. Patricia followed her inside, heels clicking on the tile. "Helen, what are you doing?" "Making a list," Helen said, not looking up. "You and Evan took out a loan against my house. My daughter's house. I'm going to need everything documented." Patricia's face went through a rapid series of micro-expressions: surprise, calculation, a flash of something that might have been panic, and then a smooth reassertion of composure. She folded her arms and leaned against the kitchen island. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't." Helen finally looked up, and the word came out so flat and cold that Patricia actually took a step back. "Don't lie to me. I checked the records. $190,000. 3 days ago. Your name is all over it, Patricia. I saw the trail. You and Evan and that little brother of his." Patricia's smile flickered but held. "Even if that were true, which I'm not saying it is, it's a family matter. Evan and Lily are married. These things happen in families." "These things don't happen in families," Helen said, turning a page and making a note. "These things happen when one family decides to eat another one alive." She said it so calmly that Patricia's face finally lost its mask. The smile dropped away, and underneath it was something hard and ugly, a face Helen had suspected existed for months but had never fully seen in the light. "What are you going to do?" Patricia demanded, her voice losing its musical lilt. "You're an old woman with no money and no one on your side. You think you can fight this? You think you can?" "I think I can start by calling Jennifer Kane," Helen interrupted. "I think I can file a fraud claim. I think I can show the court exactly how you manipulated my daughter into signing away my life savings. And I think I can prove that Evan didn't have my daughter's permission to mortgage that house. But you know what, Patricia?" She closed the notebook and met the other woman's eyes. "I don't actually have to prove all of it. I just have to make enough noise that people start asking questions. And from what I hear, you've got a lot of questions you'd rather people didn't ask." Patricia's face had gone a shade paler. Her hand crept up to her throat, fingers pressing against the hollow of her collarbone. "You're bluffing. You want to find out." For the first time in their acquaintance, Patricia had nothing to say. She just stood there, hand on her throat, staring at Helen like she was seeing a stranger. And in a way, she was. The quiet, patient, long-suffering Helen had finally put her foot down, and the ground beneath Patricia's feet was beginning to tremble. That evening, after Patricia had left in a huff of slammed doors and screeching tires, Helen sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea and her notebook spread open in front of her. Lily came down the stairs around 9 o'clock, her eyes puffy and red. "Mom!" Helen looked up. Lily's face was blotchy, her hair tangled, and she was wearing an old sweatshirt that had been Helen's in another life, a faded university logo across the chest. She looked 10 years old again, small and lost in the oversized fabric. "Come sit," Helen said, pushing a chair out with her foot. Lily Saturday. She stared at the table for a long time, her fingers picking at a scratch in the wood grain. Finally, without looking up, she asked, "Is it true? Evan, did he really?" "Yes," Helen said, and her voice came out softer than she'd meant it to. "He mortgaged the house, Lily. He transferred the money to his brother and his mother. There's nothing left of it." Lily's shoulders started to shake. The tears came silently at first, just a slow leak at the corners of her eyes. Then she pressed her palms against her face and the sobs broke through, raw and jagged, each one tearing out of her chest like a piece of her was being pulled apart. "I trusted him," she choked out. "I trusted all of them." Helen reached across the table and took her daughter's hands. They were cold, trembling, fragile as bird bones. "I know," she said. "And none of this is your fault. You hear me? Not one bit of it. But I signed the papers. You signed what they told you to sign. You believed what they told you to believe. That's not a crime, Lily. That's what happens when people you love pretend to love you back. Helen squeezed her daughter's fingers. I should have protected you better. I should have seen it coming. Lily shook her head violently. No. No, Mom, you warned me. You tried to warn me, and I wouldn't listen. I told you to trust her. I told you you were being paranoid. Her voice cracked. I told you you were old and out of touch, and you were right the whole time. She pulled her hands free and pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to push the tears back in. How do I fix this? How do I make it right? Helen reached over and gently pulled Lily's hands away from her face. She cupped her daughter's wet cheeks, thumbs brushing away the tears. We fix it together, she said. We hire a lawyer. We fight them. And we don't stop until we get our house back. But Lily, she waited until her daughter's eyes met hers. You have to be ready for what that means. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be hard. And Evan is going to try to get you back. He's going to say all the things you want to hear. Can you handle that? Lily swallowed. Her throat worked. Her eyes were still watery, but something in them had firmed up, like concrete setting in the sun. Yes, she said. I can handle it. Helen pulled her daughter into a hug and held her tight, the way she'd held her on that awful night at the funeral home all those years ago. Only this time, she wasn't promising to protect Lily from the world. She was promising to stand beside her while she learned to protect herself. The next few weeks were a blur of legal consultations and sleepless nights. Jennifer Kane took the case pro bono. I've got a soft spot for mothers who've been taken advantage of, she'd said, though Helen suspected she just enjoyed sticking it to people like Patricia. The first legal notice arrived at Evan's office on a Tuesday afternoon. He was in the middle of a quarterly review meeting when a courier walked in and handed him a thick, official-looking envelope. He opened it under the curious stares of his colleagues and went pale, paper-white, bloodless, like he'd seen his own ghost. The letter demanded immediate suspension of all property-related transactions and scheduled a preliminary hearing for the following month. Evan called his mother that night from the parking lot outside his office. The conversation, overheard by a janitor emptying trash bins nearby, was apparently not a quiet one. She can't do this, Patricia had yelled so loudly that the janitor heard every word. She's a retired nurse with nothing to her name. She can't afford to go to court. She's got a lawyer, Mom, Evan replied, his voice shaking. A real one. Jennifer Kane. She handles property cases. She's got a good reputation. Then we get you a better lawyer. The best lawyer money can buy. I'll call my cousin, he knows someone. Money? Evan laughed bitterly. What money, Mom? You already took my share. I've got nothing left. There was a pause. Then Patricia's voice came back, colder than before. Don't you dare blame me for this. I didn't force you to mortgage that house. I didn't force you to send your brother $160,000. You made your own choices, Evan. I made them because you told me to. Every single time, you told me what to do, and I did it because, his voice broke. Because I thought you knew best. I thought you were looking out for us. And now I'm going to lose my wife, and my house, and my job, and it's all. Don't you finish that sentence, Patricia hissed. Don't you dare put this on me. I've done nothing but try to help you. If you'd had a backbone from the start, none of this would have happened. The line went dead. Evan stood in the parking lot in the dark, phone still pressed to his ear, staring at nothing. The janitor, a middle-aged man who'd seen too many breakdowns to be surprised by another one, turned up his radio and went back to work. Meanwhile, the gossip machine in town had shifted into high gear. Aunt Marie was the first to approach Helen directly. She caught her on the street one afternoon, just as Helen was coming back from the library. Marie's face was flushed with the kind of righteous excitement that only small-town drama could produce. Helen. She grabbed Helen's arm like they were old war buddies. I heard what happened. That awful woman, your son-in-law's mother, the things she's been saying about you. And all along she was the one stealing your house. Helen tried to smile, but her face wasn't cooperating. It's complicated, Marie. It's not complicated at all. It's theft, plain and simple. And the whole town knows it. You should have seen her at the community center yesterday. Couldn't even look anyone in the eye. Just sat there with her cup of tea, shuffling her feet, pretending she didn't hear people talking about her. The news was both satisfying and unsettling. Helen had never wanted to be the subject of gossip. She'd spent her entire professional life staying out of people's personal business, just doing her job and going home. But she had to admit, there was a deep, marrow-level satisfaction in knowing that Patricia's mask had finally slipped. That evening, Helen sat down with Lily in the living room and told her about the change in public opinion. Lily listened quietly, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. "She deserves it," Lily said after a long pause. "She deserves everything she's getting." Helen didn't argue. She just watched her daughter's face, softer now, less frantic, but with a new hard line around the jaw that hadn't been there before. Something was hardening in Lily, like a scab forming over a deep wound. It would take time, but Helen thought maybe, just maybe, she was going to be okay. The preliminary hearing was held on a grey November morning. The courtroom was small, but it felt crowded. Helen sat next to Jennifer Kane at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Evan sat with his lawyer, a sharp, silver-haired man in an expensive suit who'd been hired on Patricia's dime. Patricia herself was in the gallery, seated in the front row, wearing black as though she were attending a funeral. She didn't look at Helen once. The judge was a woman in her late 50s with salt and pepper hair and eyes that seemed to see right through everyone. She listened as Jennifer outlined the case: fraud, breach of trust, misappropriation of funds, and unauthorized property transfer. "Your Honor," Evan's lawyer interrupted early on, rising to his feet with practiced ease, "my client and his wife are legally married. Property acquired during marriage is generally considered marital property. The add-on was made voluntarily by the wife. There's no legal basis." "Mrs. Marshall," the judge cut in, addressing Jennifer directly, "I'm not familiar with this specific situation. Can you clarify the nature of the property in question?" "Your Honor," Jennifer said, standing and smoothing her jacket, "the property was purchased solely with funds provided by Mrs. Helen Marshall, my client, before the marriage took place. It was given as a gift to her daughter. The subsequent add-on was made under false pretenses, specifically, the promise of a marital property agreement that was deliberately avoided. And the mortgage was taken out without the daughter's knowledge or consent." The judge's eyebrows rose. She looked at Evan's lawyer. "Is that accurate, Mr. Delaney?" Delaney shifted in his seat. "We dispute the characterization of false pretenses, Your Honor. It was a family decision." "Was the mortgage taken out without the wife's signature?" A long pause. Delaney's face twitched. "Yes, Your Honor. But under state law, a spouse can authorize. On a property that belonged to the wife's mother, not to the wife's estate." The judge's voice had gone quiet, which somehow made it more dangerous. "This is an unusual case, Mr. Delaney. I'd like to see the full documentation before we proceed any further. I'm granting an extension for both parties to submit evidence. We'll reconvene in 30 days. As the courtroom cleared, Helen caught Patricia's eye for a split second. The other woman's face was stiff, unreadable, but her hands were shaking. She clutched her purse so tightly her knuckles were white. Helen didn't say anything. She just gathered her papers, stood up, and walked out with Jennifer by her side. Outside the courthouse, a cold wind was blowing. Helen pulled her coat tighter and shivered. Lily was waiting on the steps, her face pale but composed. "How did it go?" she asked. "We bought ourselves some time," Helen said. 30 days. Lily nodded slowly. "I talked to Evan this morning," she said, and her voice was steady. "Before you got here." Helen stopped walking. "What did he say?" "He said he was sorry. He said his mother made him do it." Lily's laugh was short and bitter. "Can you believe that? He's 32 years old and he's still blaming his mother. I told him if he was really sorry, he'd come clean. He'd admit in court that it was all a setup. He said he couldn't do that because his mother would." She stopped, shaking her head. He's more afraid of her than he is of losing me. That tells me everything I need to know. Helen put her hand on her daughter's shoulder. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I'm not. Lily looked up at her mother, and for the first time in months, there was something like peace in her face. I mean, I'm sad about it. But I'm not sorry. I'm done feeling sorry for people who won't take responsibility for themselves. You taught me that. Helen blinked back sudden tears and pulled her daughter into a hug. They stood like that on the courthouse steps, the wind whipping around them, and Helen thought, she's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. As winter settled in, the momentum shifted. Jennifer Kane had been busy. She'd subpoenaed bank records, loan documents, and the business filings for the company that had issued the mortgage. The trail led directly to a small private lender and from that lender, back to a cousin on Patricia's side of the family. Conflict of interest, Jennifer said during a late-night strategy call. She used a family connection to push the loan through, which suggests premeditation. And I found something else. Her voice grew sharper. I found an email chain between Patricia and her cousin discussing the mortgage terms. She specifically asked if they could process it without Lily's signature. Her cousin said it was irregular but possible. Helen felt her stomach drop. That's fraud, Jennifer said. Clear and actionable. But here's the thing, this is a civil case, not a criminal one. We can prove she set this up, but it'll be up to the court to decide if it was criminal. What I can guarantee is that we'll win the property case. The house goes back to you. And Evan is a separate issue. He's still Lily's legal spouse. She'll need to file for divorce separately. But we can make that condition of the property settlement. Helen spent a long time thinking about it that night. She lay awake in bed, staring at the same crack in the ceiling she'd stared at weeks before. It was still there, thin and winding, like a dried-up river. But somehow it didn't look as scary anymore. It was just a crack. Just a thing that happened to houses over time. Fixable. She fell asleep thinking about what kind of tree she wanted to plant in the back garden come spring. The day of the final hearing was cold and bright, the kind of winter day that made everything look sharper. Helen wore her best blue sweater, the one Lily had given her 3 Christmases ago. Lily wore a black dress and her mother's pearl earrings. They sat together at the plaintiff's table, and for once, Helen didn't feel like she was waiting for the floor to fall out from under her. Patricia was in the gallery again, but her posture was different this time. Gone was the imperial lift of her chin, the commanding stillness. She sat hunched in her chair, arms crossed, foot tapping an anxious rhythm against the floor. Evan sat beside his lawyer, pale and hollow-eyed, looking like a man who'd been awake for 3 days. The judge read the evidence aloud, the loan documents, the email chain, the suspicious timing of the transfer, the total absence of Lily's signature on any of the mortgage paperwork. She asked Patricia's cousin to testify, and he did so under a heavy, sweating reluctance that made even the gallery crowd shift with discomfort. By the time the testimony was finished, the case was no longer in question. The judge ruled that the add-on to the deed had been obtained by fraud, that the mortgage was invalid, and that the property would revert entirely to Lily's sole ownership. She also made a pointed recommendation that Evan and Lily seek a legal separation, given the degree of deception involved. Evan's face crumpled. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, but Evan shook it off. He turned to look at Lily across the room, his wife, the woman he'd sworn to love, and his eyes were wet. "Lily," he said, his voice cracking. "Please. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I was scared. My mother." "Your mother didn't hold a gun to your head," Lily said, and her voice was so steady it almost frightened Helen. "You made a choice. You chose her, and her money, and her schemes, and you didn't choose me. So now you have to live with that choice." She turned away from him and faced the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to proceed with a divorce filing. I understand this is outside the scope of today's hearing, but I want it on record." The judge nodded. "Noted. You'll need to file separately, but I appreciate you making your intentions clear." Evan looked like someone had punched him in the chest. He sank back in his chair, his face ashen. Patricia, for her part, sat frozen in the gallery, her hands gripping the bench in front of her so tightly that the wood creaked. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time in her life, Patricia Collins had absolutely nothing to say. The hearing ended at noon. Helen and Lily walked out of the courthouse arm in arm, stepping into the cold winter sunlight. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue, with thin clouds stretched across it like ribbons. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. They just stood on the steps, breathing, letting the cold air fill their lungs. "Mom," Lily finally said, "I want to go home." Helen looked at her daughter. Lily's face was tired, but her eyes were clear. There was no more confusion in them, no more desperate grasping for love from people who didn't have it to give. Just quiet clarity. "Me too," Helen said. They walked to the car. Helen drove. They pulled into the driveway of the house, the white picket fence, the red roof, the manicured lawn. It looked just the same as it always had. But now it felt like it was theirs again. Helen parked and turned off the engine. They sat in the car for a moment, both staring at the house through the windshield. "I'm going to plant a tree out back," Helen said. "In the spring. Maybe a cherry tree. I've always wanted one. Can I help?" Lily asked. "I'd like that." They got out of the car and walked up the path. Helen put her key in the lock and opened the front door. The house was quiet, warm, waiting for them. She stepped inside and felt the familiar floorboards beneath her feet, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was trespassing in her own life. Lily walked into the living room, looking around at the furniture, the curtains, the bookshelf. She picked up the old framed photo of her father and held it for a long moment, studying his face. "You know what's really sad, Mom," she said, not looking away from the photo. "I don't even think Evan ever meant to hurt me. I think he just didn't know how to say no to her. And that, in a weird way, is even worse. Because it means he never really loved me enough to fight for me." Helen walked up behind her and put her hands on her daughter's shoulders. "Some people aren't born with that muscle," she said. "The one that makes you stand up for yourself. The only thing you can do is not let them break you." Lily set the photo back down and turned to face her mother. "You never broke," she said. "After everything, you never broke. How did you do that?" Helen thought about it. She thought about the 40 years of night shifts, the loneliness, the impossible weight of raising a child alone, the long dark nights when she'd stared at the ceiling in this very house, wondering if she'd made all the wrong choices. "Because I had something to protect," she said finally. "Something worth more than whatever they could throw at me. And so do you." Lily nodded. She didn't cry. She just stepped forward and hugged her mother, and the hug lasted a long, quiet time. Later that night, Helen sat at the kitchen table with her notebook in front of her. She opened it to a new page and wrote, November the 17th. House returned. Divorce filed. Patricia's lies exposed. Lily is free. She stared at the words for a moment. Then she put the notebook away, made herself a cup of tea, and watched the snow begin to fall outside the kitchen window. Soft, silent flakes, just starting to coat the lawn. It was the first time in a long time that she'd felt truly calm. There was still work to be done, the divorce would take months, and the property transfer needed to be finalized. But the heavy thing that had been pressing down on her chest, the one she'd been carrying since the day Patricia first walked through her front door with that wicker basket full of cookies, was finally gone. She thought about Patricia, probably sitting in her own house at this very moment, fuming over her defeat. Maybe plotting revenge. Maybe not. It didn't matter anymore. Helen was done carrying Patricia's weight. The snow came down thicker now, blanketing the garden in white. Helen watched it until the window fogged up with her breath, and then she wiped the glass clear and kept watching. She'd won. She'd lost time, and money, and maybe a little bit of her trust in people. But she'd kept her house, her daughter, and her self-respect. Those were the things that counted. One night about a week later, Helen's phone rang around 11 o'clock. She was already in bed, half asleep, but she picked up anyway. "Hello. It was Evan. She almost didn't recognize his voice at first. It was thin, raspy, stripped of all its usual smoothness. "Can I talk to her?" he asked. "Just for a minute. Please." Helen considered it. She thought about lying and saying Lily was asleep. But she also remembered what it felt like to lose someone, to realize too late what you'd thrown away. "She's in her room," Helen said. "I'll go get her." She got out of bed, padded down the hall, and knocked on Lily's door. Lily opened it with a questioning look. Helen held out the phone. "It's Evan." Lily took the phone without hesitation. She stepped back into her room and closed the door. Helen stood in the hallway for a moment, and then she walked back to her own room and sat on the edge of the bed, waiting. She didn't wait long. Lily came out about 5 minutes later, her face unreadable. She handed the phone back. "He apologized," she said. "A real apology this time. He said he's been in therapy. He said he finally understands what he did. He said he's not asking for forgiveness, he just wanted me to know that he's trying to be a better person." Helen studied her daughter's face. "And what do you think?" Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, very softly, she said, "I think I believe him. But I also think it doesn't change anything. I'm still divorcing him. I'm still moving on with my life." "Maybe that sounds cold." "No," Helen said. "It sounds like you've finally learned how to protect yourself." Lily smiled, a real smile, small and tired but genuine. "I guess I had a good teacher." She hugged her mother goodnight and went back to her room. Helen sat on the edge of her bed for a long time after, listening to the house settle around her. The furnace kicked on with a soft rumble. The wind gusted against the windows. Upstairs, Lily's voice hummed a few bars of a song Helen didn't recognize. Everything was going to be okay. Not perfect. Not easy. But okay. On Christmas morning, Helen woke to find Lily already in the kitchen, making pancakes. The smell of butter and maple syrup filled the whole first floor. There was a small tree in the corner of the living room, decorated with ornaments they'd had for years, some handmade, some store-bought, all worn and familiar. "Merry Christmas, Mom," Lily said, flipping a pancake with professional flair. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." They ate breakfast together at the kitchen table, the way they used to. No Patricia. No Evan. Just the two of them and the quiet, comfortable silence of people who didn't need to fill every second with talk. After breakfast, they opened presents. Helen had bought Lily a new coat, warm, practical, the kind that would last for years. Lily had bought Helen a new watering can, metal and sturdy, with a long spout perfect for reaching the back of the garden. "Thought you needed an upgrade," Lily said, smiling. Helen laughed. "It's perfect." She put it on the windowsill where she could see it every day. And when summer came, she planted her cherry tree in the back garden, just as she'd promised. She dug the hole herself, with Lily beside her, and they watered it together, watching it take root in the warm, wet soil. The divorce was finalized in late spring. Lily didn't attend the hearing, her lawyer handled it for her. Evan signed the papers without contest. The property transfer was already complete. Everything was clean, legal, final. Lily started taking classes at the community college, working toward a degree in early childhood education. She volunteered at a local daycare and found that she loved it. She was good with children, patient, kind, full of the same gentle warmth Helen remembered from her daughter's childhood. She also started seeing someone new. His name was David, a firefighter, quiet and steady, with a way of looking at Lily that made Helen think this one might actually be okay. It was early days yet, but Helen had a good feeling about him. She didn't say anything, of course. She just watched, quietly, from the kitchen window, as David and Lily sat on the back porch swing together, talking softly and laughing. Late one evening in early summer, Helen was sitting on that same porch swing by herself, looking at the cherry tree. It was small still, just a spindly little thing, but it was green and alive, and it was growing. She could already imagine what it would look like in 5 years, in 10, thick branches, pink blossoms in the spring, sweet fruit in the summer. The garden was quiet. The light was fading. Helen heard footsteps on the porch, Lily coming out to join her. "Thinking about the tree?" Lily asked, settling onto the swing beside her. "Thinking about a lot of things," Helen admitted. "How the house used to feel so heavy. How it doesn't anymore." Lily nodded. "I think that's because we stopped letting them live in here. Patricia, Evan, they're not in our house anymore. They're just in our heads, and we can evict them too." Helen smiled. "When did you get so wise?" "Good teacher," Lily said, echoing her own words from months ago. They sat together in the warm summer dusk, mother and daughter, listening to the crickets begin their evening song. Overhead, the first stars were coming out, faint pinpricks of light in the lavender sky. Helen thought about the road that had brought them here, the 40 years of sacrifice, the betrayal, the fight, the victory. She thought about all the things she'd lost and all the things she'd kept. She didn't have much left. A house that was finally hers again. A daughter who had found her strength. A cherry tree that would bloom in the spring. A quiet life in a small town where she was finally respected for who she truly was. And that, she decided, was more than enough. That was everything.